I want to talk about the Chanuka. As we were saying, there's a big problem with Chanuka, which is, like we're saying, only a problem if you need it to be something, if you're happy with it being nothing. Like many people, like Rabbi Eliezer or someone did the Tanis and Chanuka, right? It says in Sechtes Tanis. Someone with the Tanum was goes to Tanis and Chanuka, apparently he held it until his Tanis was bottle, including Chanuka. So, then it's Machlekes Tanum. Like the Gemara has, like halacha is that we split. Chanuka and Purim are not bottle, but the rest of it is bottle. But some Tanum just didn't not go as Chanuka. It's very explicit in Sechtes Tanis.
That's the
same thing.
I'm saying, is that the source of the Eden?
It's weirdly in Megillas Tanis, yeah. Because again, if you think that Esther is not Berich HaKodesh, if you think Esther is Lenet Nelichtov, then it turns out to just be a Megillas Tanis story. It's not a biblical thing, it's a rabbinic thing. And the fact that we decide that it is like a big chiddush. It wasn't, so then, of course. Rabbi didn't hold of Purim also. It was from the Shitter of the Meir that Megillas Tanis was bottle, I think. Or something. Anyways, so if you hold it like that Shitter, it's like one Shitter in the Tanoim, then it's not a thing. And maybe there were, I don't know. So this is one historical comment that I have. It's generally said, and it's said in some Chassidish Svarim, especially in Bnei Yissaschar, who liked Chanuka very much for whichever reason, and wrote explicitly that he thinks that liking Chanuka is a new thing. This is like like the Chassidim have historical consciousness, unlike most Jews, because they're modern Jews. Right? Yeah, welcome to life. So most Jews, like this is what we're going to talk about, traditionally Jews don't have historical consciousness. They don't see themselves as the children of a certain generation or of a certain period of history. Like people in Lakewood are not post-Holocaust Haredi Jews. They're just Jews. Now, of course, if you look from the outside, they say, well, your system was invented last week, we inspired these people for those purposes. That's not how they tell their own story. And that's, if you read most traditional Jewish texts and Jewish life, it mostly sees itself like this. Right? You know, thousands of examples. So there's always some Jews that have historical consciousness. One of them being the Hasidic movement, who at least some of them. Again, there's traditional ones like Toldos Yaakov Yosef, people like that are just traditional rabbinic Jews. But they're like anyone that talks about the order of the Baal Shem that came in a certain period or things like that is speaking of a historical consciousness, even if it's a messianic historical consciousness, right? Which is the way Jews become historical usually. It's still a historical consciousness. So Bnei Yissaschar has this really interesting meta historical interpretation, historiography, where he says that he thinks that Chanuka has been made into a big deal by him and his teachers. I don't think it's only himself. Apparently, wherever he hung out, they had a lot of big parties or whatever. They made it into a big avodas Hashem. And he questions why this is. He's like, well, if I'm reading the previous sources that I usually read, they don't seem to have so much torah and so much thoughts to say Chanuka. It's only.
He means to say in like a formal way, not like I'm saying.
Yeah, his answer is.
I'm pretty sure, like that's what.
I'm sure they did all the halachas, but they didn't like.
There's also a lot of secular, like the celebrating part doesn't have to be. It could just be like playing cards.
So one of the weird things with Chanuka is that it used to be a very secular Yom Tov because of it being a weekday Yom Tov. People would play cards, and then all different people, dreidel, right, and all different people switched that out and then made that into like let's sing songs and be Masorited and whatever. So that's part of the story. But in any case, and again, traditional Jews or like the old, I don't know. I'm like always having this like weird picture of like the real original Yidden don't have a problem with this kind of secular holidays, and they're like then like in the Takonas Akelis it said no playing cards all year, only on Hanukkah and Purim, like or no mixed dancing even. You know the Takonas of that Italian city, that Marimens. On mixed dancing only allowed on Purim and Hanukkah maybe, I don't remember. But so that's like traditional, real Chazal Jews. Chazal would make sense for them to have things like this. Gemara Jews. Right. Okay, but separate from that, he claims that there's not a lot of inspiration, like thoughts on Hanukkah, until the Baal Shem Tov came, and of course he said because it's Hanukkah has to do with Mashiach, and Chassidus has to do with Mashiach, so something Mashiach turns out Hanukkah. Okay, whatever his theory is, no, it's true. It's a good theory. It's actually true. But I'm not getting into this. Hanukkah is a messianic Yom Tov. It's always been historically. But this is itself an historical conscious. Like the first Hanukkah was also a messianic Hanukkah, right? They thought that Mashiach is coming, as it says in Sefer Daniel. So that's also, but it's a certain way of thinking, which here's like, and he's like thinking of it like he's doing this like his history of thought. Like, why is it that people didn't have Torahs on Chanukah and now they do? And that's the Bnei Yissaschar's thought, and many people seem to accept this as the historical story. Like, these are the facts. There was not Chanukah, like you're saying, Chanukah is a small thing, then it became a big thing, or for various reasons. You know, in America, Chanukah is a big thing because of Christmas or whatever, and other reasons.
This is a good time.
Well, it's always been a good time. It depends on how your society is structured.
The secular part of it was always big. Like, it was always like a big thing because making nice foods, whatever.
Maybe. I mean, you could say this. People say, okay, well, in America, Chanukah is like one of the major Jewish holidays because they're going to have their holiday at the same time, and you have to have some competition. But really, Christmas is not a major Christian holiday either. The major Christian holiday is Easter, and Christmas is like became big for secular reasons also, or for reasons. And for the same reason, Hanukkah became big in the same place. You could say it that way. If you don't have to say, well, it's Christmas jealousy. Anyways, I don't know if this historical fact is so true, because when I've read I've done this work of organizing thoughts that people had about Hanukkah and Drush and Medrash, there is absolutely yes Medrash for Hanukkah, just like there is for any. So if you go back all the way to Chazal, which are the first drushes that people said in sermons and shul, there are many of them for Hanukkah, actually a lot. Some the Medrashim were written later, but these are traditional forms and things like that. There's Psikta, the Rav Kahana, which is Medrash al Amiyadim, which starts with Hanukkah. There's the second Psikta, which is a reworking of that. That's a lot of 8 or 9 or 10 Shurim on Hanukkah. There's Vamidbar Rabbah, which has a lot of Torahs, which I think are on Hanukkah, which is also a later book, but again, Parshas Nasa, Kriyas Torah for Hanukkah. And the old way of doing things was not to talk about history, but to talk, okay, we'll get to this. But anyways, there is a lot of Torahs on Hanukkah. If you read in Drushes HaRishonim, which we have few of, because they didn't take it seriously enough to write down their sermons most of the time. Every rabbi, gave a shir every Shabbos, or said some Torahs in the parasha. We have very few of them, but the ones that we have all have Hanukkah as whatever, just you have every week. But when it's Erev Chanukah or Hanukkah, you give a shir on Hanukkah, or you have a special shir. And Shiltas Ravachi, which is one of the first books to be published after the Talmud, has a special part of Hanukkah, and another part with the Medrash of Hanukkah, the stories of Hanukkah and Medrashim, besides for the Halacha. And it wasn't printed in all the versions, but after Parshas Vayishlach, there's Medrash Hanukkah, Shiltas and Shiltas.
Is the version within the Sif?
I'm not sure. It's not I think it's printed later. You could find it in wherever. The Netziv has the halacha part. Parshas Vayishlach has a whole drush on Chanukah halachas, but it also has another part which was not printed. That's one that's where you would look, right? Again, we have some drusha books of the Rishonim, of the Ritkiv Rishonim, like the Talmidei Rashba's books, Rabbi Shuai ben Shuib, Rabbi Yaakov Skili, Minchas Yaakov. There is a Mitzrayim book, Medrash Agodol, what's it called? Rambam's grandson's book, Reb David Anogid, Medrash Agodol, I think, or something like that.
He has a Hanukkah?
Yes, there's a long thing on Hanukkah also, in Parshas Vayeshev. All of these have drushes for Hanukkah, not less than they have on Pesach. So this theory of Hanukkah... The Maral, of course, has a book on Hanukkah, yes, Ner Mitzvah, but then people say, well, maybe the Maral started it. But it's not true, this is traditional. Maral organizes it in his way, but every drasha book, I didn't do research on the early modern drasha books, which is a whole genre. People between Rabbi Benel and Bina Leitim and things, people like that, Rabbi Ezra Pijo. I don't know, but I didn't check. We have to check. I would imagine that they also have drashas for Hanukkah. So this, and Drashas Druchim has, yeah, for sure, famous drasha. So this whole theory of Hanukkah being some kind of left out child is just not true. I have no idea what the Bnei Yissaschar is basing himself on. There is Torah on Hanukkah, and again, as much as there's on Purim and on Pesach and on Shavuos, you have one drasha for each thing. What is he expecting exactly? So I don't exactly know what the reality he is referring to.
Less because there's nothing to write on.
I'm getting to this problem, but in fact, I'm going to answer you this question. But in fact, just to say this fact that Bnei Yissaschar says, then he talks about the Zohar. So the Zohar doesn't have a part on Hanukkah, which is slightly true for the Zohar. But again, the Zohar is a book on the Torah, and it's missing the Zohar. But the Zohar does have drushes for Hanukkah, In other words, again, as much drushes as he has on Lag BaOmer, sorry, that's not a good example. I've made a list of Zohar on Chanukah. There is. I've written about this. I've written them a little at length in the beginning of my Zohar booklet. There is Zohar on Chanukah. Again, it's hard to make this into a fact. I don't know where the fact of there not being. Darizal has the Kavanah Chanukah. Well, not a lot, but like, how much do you want? There's like 2 things to do. Like, that's the whole thing. But he doesn't have less on Chanukah than he has on Matzah Shabbos. You know, like, actually, there's a lot of torahs on Matzah Shabbos. But just to say, it's not like, it doesn't seem to be missing. It's not clear to me what he is talking about when he says missing. If you think in halacha, there's Hilchos Chanukah just like there's any other halachas. There's, Pilpulim and Sechtas Shabbos and Dam Madlikin. There's even more, I think, because it was studied on Chanukah. I'm not entirely sure what the Bnei Chas is referring to. What he might be referring to is just the thing that I discussed earlier. That like, there's this Baal Shem Tov period, like 17th, 18th century, pietist revolution, like which Chassidus is only a part of. Like if you read Rishis Chachma, this like called Musar movement, and where it's like trying to reclaim these like 2 secular holidays or 2 secular parts of Judaism and make them very, what's known as sometimes in their literature about the Arizal, like this sacralization or the ritualization of daily life. Arizal makes everything into a mitzvah and Chanukah is definitely one of the things that happened in that. So it might be that that's the memory. If the Mesilas is talking about something, like you read Kedushas Levi on Chanukah, he seems to be trying to do this very explicitly. Kedushas Levi is one of the first Chassidic books printed, and when the first book Rabbi Yitzchok printed, and he was someone that understood his place in the Jewish life. Wasn't, besides for being a Ditcheva, he was a rabbi of a big town, a big city, and he knew what he's doing. And the first book he prints is that. The second book actually he prints is the Kedushas Levi on Chanukah, which is very explicitly, it has more goals, but very explicitly also trying to make Chanukah into a religious thing. And he has this whole rant against playing cards, and like part of his like main thing. So probably the Bnei Chas, if he's referring to something, he's referring to that. But that's a European history. It's not true. If you go slightly more back, you see Chanukah being a legitimate holiday just like any other one. I don't think this history is correct. It's hard to say. These are like impressions, but just from reading the books, you don't see any difference. Okay. And therefore, I don't know if you need the whole theory of the Eirus Mashiach. Well, maybe you do for other reasons. Okay. Makes sense. What I do think is, like you're saying, there is a problem. What is the problem? That we're not sure, for us, people like us, and this is also a new problem. People like us seem to be stuck where, like, what's the text? Like, if it's Pesach, okay, let's learn the Gadash Shel Pesach. Purim, you read Megillas Esther. After we decided that it's Peruch HaKodesh. Before that, we didn't know. Possibly and so on. And it's not clear what the like main text, the text of Chanukah is. There isn't really an accepted such text. Now, important to notice, and this is something that actually happened at some point. I don't know when, but at some point it happened. I mean, there's still much later people that are working with this within this framework. But if again going back to the Medrash, what Medrash will do, what the Chachamim, and Medrash meaning from the times of Tanoim until the times of until when, I wonder, until when, at least through the times of people writing the classic Piyutim, okay, until the Muslim conquest. I don't know after that. The drushes of Rishonim don't work with the system so much. But anyways, this is all like history of drushes. One of the like things that Jewish historians used to write about was like Hadrashas B'Yisrael, Anyways, the classic
historical theory that Chazal didn't like the Chashmonaim or something.
Yeah. I'm skipping that theory. It's not true, and it's not relevant to this discussion. Chazal did Chanukah or whatever.
Yeah, so that would be the similar kind
that
of
would be Wait, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, I'm skipping. Wait. Point is that when you ask this question, like, what is the text? The answer traditionally is, which traditionally modern traditional Jews have forgotten, not only in the context of Chanukah but in the context of any other holiday. The answer is Kriyas HaTorah. Okay. So Chazal, and this is the Mishnah and Megillah, very old, one of the oldest Mishnayos possibly, have had a calendar of readings from the Tanakh for from the Torah, not only from the Tanakh. Besides that from Haftarahs, but that's maybe later or less set. But they had a calendar of readings from the Chumash for every Yom Tov, including for Chanukah and Purim, right? And this is where we learn something very important from the way they read the Torah, because they find readings from the Chumash even for things that didn't happen, right, in those days. In other words, like they do, it starts from really them. This is, if we will understand this, we'll really understand how they read Torah in a relevant way. Because when they when they do, what are we going to read on Tisha B'Av? Oh well, it's a Parsha and Parshas Vayeschanan. It happens to be the Parsha of the week also usually in our schedule. But the whole Parsha, Kisar D'Bana, V'Nishaltem, it's about the Golas. Okay, it's a prophecy, but it's literally the Parsha of Tisha B'Av. And now if about Darshan, and you could see this in the Piyut also, would come and say a shir on Tisha B'Av, the obvious place to start the shir from, and then you do Medrash, you could fly to wherever you want. But the pasuk you start with is Kisar D'Bana. And the same thing Pesach, the first day Pesach, we read, depending on which version you do, the Mishnah or the Gemara, or whatever it is you read, or the second day Pesach, where you read the Karban Omer, and then you give a drasha on Mitzvah Omer. And then if you think, wait, Haman was killed today, so Haman must have been learning Karban Omer, and then they go back and know this famous Medrash of Mordechai and Haman. That Medrash is based on them having this structure of this Medrash, where on the second day Pesach we learn Hilchas Omer. And that's, we say Haggadah, Halacha, everyone whatever they like, and Hamad Chatzadik must have been doing that already. But that's how they learned. And now nowadays we don't do that. You would not expect. You realize what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's great.
It's fish punch. And now nowadays if you go into a shul on the second day Pesach, you see by the way the same problem people have. Like what do you say drishas on second day Pesach? The first day is there's Haggadah Pesach. What do you do after? What do you do on the third day Chalamayid? Like what does the shir start about? So it's random, whatever you want. Or Shvish Pesach even people have a problem. Shvish Pesach we stuck in the Shir Sayam, so whatever. But what we used to be is like this is Parsha Sayam. Today is the Parsha of Omer, and you read the Medrash. There's Medrash on it. This is the Medrash that was said on the second day Pesach. Very, very simple answer, and that's what they do. They did on every Yom Tov on Purim. They would be on V'yav Amalek, and on Parsha Shkulim would be on Kisisa or whatever. There's different shittas what Shkulim is, and so on. That's how Chazal worked. That's how the classic Jewish study worked. I don't know. And in other words, like if you're a Rebbe and you're saying and making a tish on the third day of Sukkot, like what text do you prepare for the Torah for the tish? You will look in whatever they read in the Torah. I mean, Kriyas Torah is basically for that, right? What is Kriyas Torah for? It's not like some weird ritual of saying things. And like if you're a doctor, you have to say the correct top. It's about learning, right? So this is like where we start. Like,
so they already told us what the focus on. So
it's like Kriyas Torah. It's a fetish. It's a Mishnah. It says in the Siddur. You're like, come on. And finally, they told us, I'm not making mechad or something. This is actually how they did it. I don't know almost any Rebbe. There's actually one book, the Ishvitzer books, which had this thing of doing things according to Chazal style, would say Torah every Yom Tov. If you read Tzeit Yesharim, which I have here, and Beis Yaakov also is the Ishvitzer Rebbe's, would do this. They would say Torah on the Kriyas Hayam, like on the second day Pesach, would always be a Torah on whatever they were read, whatever was read earlier in the show. With this, they're only people following classical style of Medrash. I don't know almost any other book that does this. Even the Rishonim Drashas don't seem to do this. They do the Parshas Shavua that they do, but they don't do Yom Tovim. They do Stam Drush Yom Tov, but they don't do the Kriya of that Yom, which seems to be a tradition that was forgotten for some reason. I don't know why.
Because the Kriya wasn't.
Because they stopped the Kriya. Because Kriya Torah was ruined.
No, that wasn't changed. So why would? It's funny that it's forgotten. Like the anchor.
Yeah, but Kriyas Torah was ruined. We don't really. Nobody. Firstly, whatever, for various reasons, we can't learn, and Kriyas Torah is bracha levatol or whatever. So, chaz v'sholem. It's a bracha. I mean, yeah. So, it's possible that this has to do with Kriyas Torah being ruined. If you come to think about it, since we stopped translating and we stopped all the way of things like that. I don't know. That's just I'm thinking now. Okay. So and therefore Chanukah has a kriya. It's the kriya of the Nesiim. I mean, very pushet, and that's what the drusha should be on. And actually, if you read the psikta, that's what it's on. By Yivim Kalas Moshe, that's the famous psikta of Chanukah. There's others in the later midrashim that do the same thing. They go on the seder on the Siyam and they say Torah, and that's why I said the Bamid Barabba. Apparently, there's a lot of Torah in Bashas Nusay, which Bamid Barabba might have written very late, by Moshe Darshan or someone. But there's a huge amount of drushas on these parshas, and possibly, I don't know the size, I made that up, but possibly is where Chanuka Torah is originally. And they're not about Hanukkah. I mean, sometimes they find like an action, but they weren't worried on everything being relevant in that way, immediately relevant in that way. So now what happened? What does this mean? Let me try to move with this. What does this mean, right? What this means is that the fact that we don't have a real text that tells the story of Hanukkah is not a baya bichlal. And I'll tell you even more than that. In the Mishnah, we don't even read the story of Pesach and Pesach. This is something that the Gemara started. Might have been two ancient minhagim, but if you read the Mishnah Megillah, you see there's a whole series of kriyas in the Mishnah, and then there's a whole series of kriyas in the Gemara. And if you notice, like one consistent difference is, we do of course like the Bavli, but one consistent difference is that the Mishnah always reads the mitzvah sayam. So basically the pashas of the mitzvah samayadim, that's what they read on every Yom Tov. We don't do that, or we do that also because we have so many kriyas, we have Yom Tov Sheni, so we have time for that too. But we prioritize the stories. Shvi Shel Pesach, and the Mishnah is just reading a Mishnah, the pashas samayadim Shem Mishnah Torah, if I remember correctly, or something like that. And we just do Shir Sayam according to some medrash that Shir Sayam was that day, and things like that. On Shavuos, in the Mishnah we read Shiva Shavuos. The pashas of it's 5 psukim by the way, the whole thing. That's what you read. And what we do is we figured out that it's Matan Torah, so we read that. It's not only because maybe the idea that Shavuos is Matan Torah is later, but it's also there's this change of like looking for a story. I'm not sure if this is the same change that I'm touching here, but it's something similar where in classic Chazal way of thinking, you don't need to have a place in the Chumash where it says this story. It's enough that you have the same framework. Just like on Purim they read Vayavei Amalek, and everyone like, well, Amalek, come on, well, yeah, sort of the same story. A bad guy wants to kill the Jews for no good reason, and we got back at him. That's basically, and then people say, oh, but was he really Einik of Amalek? And we get into these complications, but that's not really how it started. And the same thing with Hanukkah. And Hanukkah, it's actually explicit. The Midrashim actually talk about this explicitly, some of them. Hanukkah is Chanuka Samizbech. That was obvious to everyone. Unlike to some later people that only read the Torah and never realized what's going on. But everyone knows Hanukkah, like it's called Hanukkah. Like, what do you think Hanukkah is? Hanukkah is
and the waiting, like you say, the waiting.
Yeah, Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is a term from the Torah. It's not a term that we made up. Hanukkah says Hanukkah it says many times, and by Shlomo, by Nehemiah, by Moshe. I mean, every time there's a Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is a thing. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's called Hanukkah.
How long is it?
I don't remember.
Is it 8 days?
No, he has 12 days, I think. No. I don't remember. That's one of the drushas that they talk about is this question: how many days? But in any case, if you look at Megillas Tanis and in Psikta Rabasi, they have this discussion. I've written about it, but I forgot.
Asked about the Mishkan of Shlomo.
Yeah.
Why is it 7?
Yeah. There's 7.
Why is it 8 days?
Yeah, there might have been 14 by Shlomo, depending on which pasuk you read. Okay. What am I saying? So, but Hanukkah is Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is a mitzvah. I mean, the Rasak, some way mitzvahs even counted as a mitzvah. Like every time you build a mizbeach, you have to do meluim, you have to do maybe some karbonis, maybe there's some seder, and that's a mitzvah. So, and okay, now for some reason we do this every year. That's an interesting thing of this Hanukkah. But Hanukkah, whatever Hanukkah is,
it's the most recent one. Maybe they did before the ones before that.
Possibly, might be the Megillas Tanis might say something like that.
I'm saying Megillas Tanis are
not sure.
I'm sure that other days before things go through cycles. So I'm not sure.
Could be. I don't know. You think Rosh Chodesh Nisan? I mean, there's a Megillas Tanis also has a Rosh Chodesh Nisan as Yom Chanukah Samizbech of nobody knows when. A Tosef Chaga or something like that. I don't know. A Tosef Tmina English. It might be referring to just the Moshe Rabbeinu's Chanukah. Yeah, possible. But I don't know. It doesn't sound like something that you should be celebrated every year. Because Hanukkah is literally like the first time. Well, no, it's not the first time. So what's the point? I'm not sure. But in any case, but whatever it is, we know.
These two actually started with Nehemiah's some sort of nace by Nehemiah's Chanukas on his back.
Yeah, that's a different story. There's always Nisim, but that I'm not saying that. The point is that Hanukkah is a thing. Hanukkah is not something that's a new thing. It's an old thing, just like a goy. So I think this is very important. So this is like a halachic way of reading. In other words, instead of a historical way, right? Like the difference between history and law is that history is something that happened once, and then the second time is a whole new thing, right? That's why people that have historical consciousness, or this kind of historical consciousness, are always living new stories. They're always being cut off from tradition, really. History and tradition are mamash estirim and ayba. You can't be a historian that's traditional. Although you're like having like a like history of. When the second there's history of, it's not the thing itself. Right, and he's like saying, well, yeah, that was then, but what's now? But if it's halacha, no, it's like a chakasolim, right? The law is you should do this, or you can say even like that. If you will be in such a situation, you would, or because it once happened, you do it forever. Things like that. There's nothing different from the one that we're doing this year, from the one that was last year, or the one 10 years ago, or the one. And like you're saying, it might be a different Gilgal. Maybe Haman is a Gilgal of Haman. Like, what's the difference? It's the same concept. We have a parsha of Haman, and literally the Gemara, even the drash that said that Megillas Esther is part of the Torah was based on a drash. Somehow it means this also. He's also a Malek. He's also the same thing. And this is exactly what they did Chanukah. So there's Kriyas Torah and there's Daf Torahs, which are from Shlema and from Shlema. There's even Mizbashich Sabayis from Telem, which is like some minhag and some Sechta Seifrim to read on Chanukah. And these are like halachas. No, it's not halacha, it's a story, but it's the same. The same Chanukah that was then is the same Chanukah that is now. Now you ask me, well, what about the whole story with so this is the text. Do you have a text? And you have a text that's it's talking about this. It's not talking about some other one. Yeah, it wasn't different. Like, it's not other, it's just like it's the halacha of eating matzah on Pesach is not a different halacha this year than last year. It's the same one. It's a different instance of the same one. What about the stories? Stories are not important. Since when are stories important?
Well, how old is Al-Anisa?
Al-Anisa is how you do it. It's not a storytelling session. Who cares what's the...
There's some story in there. It's pretty deep.
So I think that's called Nemra Likra Nemra Lichtov. In other words, and that's what I want to get to in a second. Let me think. So what is the point? So there are stories like before Al Hanissim. What about the stories that are in the Chumash? What about Tzipei Yetzias Mitzrayim? Like it's not like there's a mitzvah to eat matzah and disconnected from something that happened. There's some, or maybe the mitzvah of halal if it's a mitzvah, or Tzipei Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is a kind of halal. What's that about? So what I think is that this goes back like the Gemara Yema says. There's Lamatzei Chalel Ashachar. So someone said, I forget who, that this is about Esther. I mean, everyone is assuming that it's about Esther. The question is what's Shaykh's Esther El Ashachar? And one person said because Ma El Ashachar is the end of the night. El Ashachar, the Gemara understands to mean like the first light that you see coming up when it's still dark. And like an aisle, it's a light that spreads out like mispatza, like the horns of an aisle. And this is Esther. Why is it Esther? Because it's the last thing of the night. Well, it's the beginning of the morning also, but last thing of the night. And Esther was Sef Kol Hanissim. So that's the connection. And then so now what does it mean Sef Kol Hanissim? The lastness, okay? This is a very interesting thing to say. So you would have thought, and I'm explaining the Gemara because I think this is what the Gemara is doing. What do I mean the lastness? So since then there's only Teva. Like there used to be miracles, and now there's no more miracles. And Esther was the last miracle. Now this is not true. It's not what any step of the Gemara thought. And it's also nonsense because what do you mean? There's Nissim, there's tons of Nissim. What do you mean the lastness? I don't think there's any source, and
So what's the Ness of Esther?
Ness doesn't mean breaking. Wait, and listen. Ness in Chazal does not mean breaking nature. It means saving the people in an unexpected way, or saving someone in an unexpected way. That's all it means. They didn't have the concept of nature. So, as the Chacham Tzvi says, Teva was a word invented after Chazal. Nature, it's literally a Greek word, and that was translated somehow as Teva by the translators. Chazal, there's the concept of Olam Kimonag Enag, but that doesn't that's not a concept of nature. I don't think the Rambam tries to make it into the concept of nature. I don't know if that's correct, but in any case, Nes is for sure not a Lafuka Olam Kimonag Enag in Chazal. Nes just means I could say unexpected, or even the unexpected, like a great thing that happened. something like that. Yeshua. Yeshua Nes are Shemes Nadaf. Ala Nisim ve'ala. Ve'ala. Thank you. So Yeshua and Nes is a Nes in this sense. I don't know if it's how biblical it is. I'm trying to remember if it says Nes in the Torah in this sense. Katuv. So check. But it's a Shem Nirdaf to Yeshua, which is a very biblical word for these kind of things. Does it say Nisim in the Torah? It says Neflois, things like that. You don't know. Okay, we'll check at some point. In any case, Ala Nisim.
Nes literally means banner, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're explaining it.
Yeah, it makes more sense with a banner. Of course, it does not steer it to the irregular understanding. But for sure, Nes, I'm not going to check right now. But the point is, Nes in this doesn't mean something like it doesn't. It's not a discussion of Teva and Nes. That whole discussion doesn't exist in Chazal. Yeah, Nes in this sense is not biblical. It's rabbinic language, but it's rabbinic language which means the same as Yeshua, which is biblical language. Like we see in Allah Nisim, I'm not sure if that's the original version. There might be additions, but the point is Nisim, Perkon, these are the same things. Now, but what does it even mean? So now it's even a bigger question. Does this person that said this, even in the Havaman over here, did he think that the last time God saved the Jews was Purim? Seriously? Is there and I have to be very clear, is there any Chazal shitta or idea or concept of there being a Tkufas Hanes and Tkufas Ateva or a Tkufas of God helping the Jews and then he stopped doing it? Or stopped doing it in miraculous ways? There's absolutely no such thing. And nowadays we're very used to, and the Ramban I think was the one that made this up first, that there's Hester, there's Zmanim of Hester Punim and Zmanim of Gilui Punim, like Hashgacha, like Chaznish says, Marid of Lemalim was for times when there was Hashgacha. This concept of being times of Hashgacha and times of not Hashgacha is not, I don't know of it being authentically Jewish. It's not something that we find in Chazal. And Chazal I don't see where ever that there's something about prophecy which we have to get to, and there's things about Nisim not happening so much, and Ruya Yisrael lasses lem Nes bebiashnia, and it didn't happen, things like that. But that just means that it was not people were not worthy to be saved.
Maybe when they stopped fighting to be saved.
No, they're saying that's what it says. There's one of the shidduch Shleili B'chaim. But it's not. I don't think that they have this thing where now it's the man has to punim or something like that. I don't know of such sayings in Chazal. And much later, the Ramban has this kind of thing. Also, but the Ramban it's still tuli b'schar. If you work hard enough, you'll get back to gili punim. But I don't think that that's true. So in other words, I don't think it would be accurate to think that what I'm saying is Esther Seif Nisim, that was the last time. Nowadays, now we're on our own. Now we're stuck. Now we're in the dark. Something like that. That's not ever what it meant. And then they would ask the kasha, what do you mean Esther Seif Nisim? Chanuk? This is all stam gemara. Nitna lichtov. Nitna lichtov come in. What do you mean? And it says, okay, what if Chanuk Purim is also nitna lichtov? We'll have to make a different shot in the pasuk. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that this is just clarifying what it ever meant, right? In other words, the original pshat of this, again, it's all stam gemara, which usually means clarifying what it says. The original pshat, if it would be two mamirim, you could say, well, what did he think? But it's just the gemara explaining itself. The original pshat of someone saying Esther Seif Nisim means the last story in the Torah and Tanakh. That's what it always meant. And if you see this very clearly in Chazal in 10,000 ways, their whole world, at least the way they talk, the whole world is the Torah. Is the not on the Torah, the written Torah, the Torah Shabbat. They could say things like there is nothing like Shlish Malchi Bekippah, right? Abu Malchi Bekippah. What does it say in the Megillah? Right? The three kings were Melech Bekippah. Yeah, whatever. And then Tosfos goes, well, you ever heard of Alexander the Great? Ever heard of Genghis Khan? And they say, nah, what it means, it says in the Torah. He doesn't say in the Torah. And that's true. That's not a stickle Torah from Torah. That's obvious. They would have never thought. They didn't even try to check. Not because they were dumb and they didn't know how to ask some guy, how many kings did he hear of. They're saying a vart on the Chumash. They're not saying a vart on the world. They're saying, look, read the Chumash, you'll see there's three. Now there's there's something to learn from this, there's some meaning in this, whatever they're trying to get at. But this is always how Chazal work. Their world, the world that they're talking about, their literary world, is from Bereshit until end of the Vreyamim or whatever. And that's the whole thing. And that's why then later someone might have not known. It's like we're clarifying it on Lichtov. But when someone says Nosef Nisim, it means this is the last Nes, and that's why the Pusik calls Rayel Hashacha, because they always have this thing. The Medrash always works with this, like the text explains itself. El Hashacha has this connotation of the last. So where's the last? So read till the end of the book. That's what it is. That's the last. That's how they read. They read everything according to itself. The text always has don't ask me. What? As a not an S according to this. It's not an S.
So that you could write, and not an S you could write.
Or it could be no. What do you mean? Nisim in the sense of like a story of this Yidden being saved. The last one is Esther. And Chanukah is a famous one where it's also right. It's Mefarsem Nisa. Everyone knows the Yidden were saved in Chanukah. But that's not in the Chumash, so it's not counted. Not in the Tanakh. Well, as in the were the Yidden being saved, apparently. So, firstly, I could tell you something cute, which is that Esther was after Ezra.
Sure.
But the Gemara doesn't. Yes, Josephus actually has it that way. He says, Esther was the last one, and he also has. That's why. Interestingly, by the way, this is interesting. So Josephus says the Shmus, who's the last prophet. In Chazal, in the famous Mama Chazal, which is in 5 different places, it says Chag, Zechariah, Malachi were the last prophets. And Josephus says Esther was the last prophet. So explains Rabbi Milikovsky, who wrote on the Seder Olam, that Pshat is Poshet, this Machlokes, who was the last? Kalal Mamod, that whoever the last book in the Bible is the last prophet. Shal is just what's the last Chazal.
He has prophets.
Yeah, no, he says he has a difference. I know, but he has a difference. Not so real prophets, whatever. That's a chilek.
He says in a traditional
whatever. He's makes a chilek. Because the real ones, the ones from the Torah, the Hilchas, the people that have the Gemuros has. I'm getting this, so he says that is Poshet Machlokes. Seder Olam holds that famously that Esther was before Ezra. So that's why the prophets of the time of Ezra were the last prophets. But according to Josephus, which is the accepted history, Esther was after this whole thing. So therefore, she's the last. That's but the Kalal. But now you're saying that the Gemara of Esther Soif Nisim might be going according to the shit that Esther was after. Maybe it's just like it's not nobody celebrates. Not sure. It's possible. I'm sure you could write an article in something with such a theory. If it be true, anyways. No, but it's not a nest. Which nest happened? The Gemara says, Lowy nas a nest from Ezra. You have to realize Ezra is seen as a failure in some way, in some basic way. He's great, he made the Torah and everything, but in some ways a failure. His aliyah didn't work out, so maybe that's not a nest. It says a fetish, and Adi Ave, Lowy nas a nest, but it would be, that's right.
We only have a Yom Tov on the secret day that maybe he died.
It's Hanes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, we might have some Megillas Tanasim to have him from when he built these things. Yeah, we don't actually sell it. So what do I want to get with all of this? But so it's important to know who is the last one in the Nitan Lichtav. Like it's a thing. If you're the last one, okay, it's just a pshat and a pasuk. I don't know if we should make more of it out of it. But what I would want to say is that we have to still ask a certain question, which is that I am claiming that it makes no difference what happened. It only makes a difference what you have to do. Something like that. Like the Gemara in Yema says, "My dahava, who cares? Oh, it's the future. We'll find out then. Ask him. And that is not true, because the kasha of this is the Torah. The whole Torah, and like you said, the whole, most of Tanakh is actually stories, it's not mitzvahs. It's things that happened. So why at some point, this is a basic question about Jewish historiography. How could it be, so like based on this like kind of, I think, misunderstanding of the way Chazal read its stories. If the whole Torah, or like half of it, is history, basically much of Tanakh is again, by the way, this is a big difference between the Jewish Bibles and the Greek Bibles, Christian Bibles also, where like we have 3 parts, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, and they have more parts. One of them called history, right? For what's we call Nevim Rishonim. It's not exactly, but like in the yeah, sort of. It's organized this way. They're talking about Shivim organized things this way, where there's like wisdom books, there's prophecy books, there's poetry books, and there's history books. Yeah, definitely. I remember. What?
Divrei Yomim is that?
The Divrei Yomim is just repeat, so I don't know.
But it seems like a.
Maybe it's not a.
Bunch of
I don't know if Divrei Yomim. I don't know if Divrei Yomim was written by HaKadosh. I don't know who does that say anymore.
It was a bunch of histories that were put together.
Okay, and therefore, what's the
last things that they had, because they want to keep
yeah, but what's
the old histories they had? They just put it all together and keep it. And some towns, Yichus.
Chazal read Divrei Yomim as Yichus. It's a whole different thing. Okay. But what's the point? The point is not Divrei Yomim. Nevim Rishonim. Divrei Yomim is a repeat, and it's Hilchas Yichus. It's different. The Chazal actually in Masechtas Pesachim think that there's some secret in Divrei Yomim. Not can get into this. They don't think of it as history. Just to be clear, they think of it as Hilchas, as the pasuk of Perek Asari Yichus. Okay, Perek Asari Yichus is a sugya and shas, and the psukim for that are Divrei Yomim, and we don't know that for various reasons, political reasons and halachic reasons, and even deeper reasons. There's a whole thing, and Rabbi Yechonah didn't want to teach Divrei Yomim to certain people because they're not. It was a whole thing. So, not history. No, there's no category of history. In Chazal don't even have the category of history, and they also don't have a category of history in Tanakh. I'm saying Nevim Rishonim, right? The books of Shmuel Melachim. Everyone reads them as histories, and if you ask like a rational categorization of the Bible, these are the history books of the Bible, right? Sort of from Yeshua Sheftem, Shmuel Divrei Yomim, Shmuel Melachim are a continuous history, right? The history of the Jewish people. You really have to start the Devarim, right? The Devarim Yeshua Sheftem were whatever. Start Shemos from Shemos from Sefer Shemos through Sefer, the end of Sefer Melachim is the history of the Jewish people from Yetzias Mitzrayim through, or from Bereshis. You could start from the beginning of the world. And Divrei Yomim is a sort of a very short version of that whole thing, right? And in our language, this is not called histories. This is called Nevi'im. Very weirdly, because they're not really prophecies. Prophecies are Yichazkel. That's why it's called Sefer Nevi'im, because the Navi wrote it. And Navi seems to have written some other books also. I think that there's something serious going on. I don't think they're just called Nevi'im because Nevi'im, it's also possible and also not really clear that Nevi'im had to wrote all of that. I'm not sure about that either. What time is it? We could say what I think is like this. What I think is that, where am I? What I want to think is, so again, the question is, if much of the, I'm turning around. If much of the Tanakh is history, so how come Chazal don't continue it and write history? So you say, okay, well, it's not inspired, so what? So it will be Medrash, it will be what's the big problem? Seems to be a very weird thing to claim. And this is the question. So the Mefarshim, like the first one, I don't know if it's the first one, the Chidah and this Gemara in Yoma says like Chanukah was written, so why not? And he comes up with theories, just to be very clear, just to show you how the traditional Jews thought. He comes with maybe Chanukah wasn't such a big miracle, it's so interesting, Purim was more interesting, all kinds of like Teichkim. That's what he says.
It's just such a funny thing. I've always exposed with the miracles, and like it clearly was a big deal. Like,
yeah, I mask him, but the point is, it was less. He says it was not such a big deal, and Purim was a bigger deal, so that's what.
I think it was.
Okay.
The ones who were living then.
Who?
The ones who were living then.
Well, they didn't write it down either.
I hear.
They didn't write it down. They didn't. They didn't. And the ones who were living in the times of Purim wrote it down, and the ones living in the times of Hanukkah didn't. And they now what we would always say, well, there were different people in different periods of history that thought differently, and whatever. And it was like the Bible was very closed according to them. But this is very untraditionally Jewish thoughts, just to be very clear. The Mefarshim, you would not find such theories until very late.
Mostly like a practical matter, no?
What's practical? Why can't you write?
Things are written or not. And the question is who.
Moshe wrote things from Yetzias Mitzrayim, and
Yeah, but I'm saying just at the time you would say there was a very small group of people. A minute later, they had this short moment and they had to slow.
That's not a real problem. Seriously, when exactly did Moshe write the story of him? I mean, again, you're thinking like a goy, not like these are like practical problems. What do you mean? On this, a cloud will come, and right? Like you're asking as if like you could answer questions this way. When did Moshe Rabbeinu write the 13th Sefer Torah that he wrote? Like, come on, he wrote. The only question we have is if it was Shabbos or the Shaila of Sivan Shabbos. But like, how did he write in 31 days? Yeah, he wrote in one day. It's a good example of like a real that's how the ahistorical Jews think. And I think there has to be a theory here. I'm trying to give the theory of why the people that didn't, I want to say very clear, I don't think that the reason why the people, assuming that these are the same people, right? We're living ahistorically here, dangerously. The same people who decided to write down the Nesef Purim didn't decide to write down a Chanukah. And they didn't say, well, but sadly we don't have prophecy, so we didn't. You could say that. The Bahag seems to say something like that. But, some an earlier source for someone saying something like that. But I don't even know, by the way, I don't even know if it's true that you need prophecy to write a book in the Bible. And in Sechtes Megillah, there's this whole discussion, there wasn't a discussion, well, are you a prophet? Well, you have a medrash. I have a medrash that says, Al Tois Fel Devorav. I have another medrash that says, Ksafti L'Chashalishim. Okay, we're arguing in Allah now. Is this din? Is there a source in the Torah for writing this down? It's not a dig. Later, there's another discussion if Esther B'rich HaKodesh, but it seems to be two separate discussions. And even Esther B'rich HaKodesh, I wonder if it just. I'm not going to get into this question of B'rich HaKodesh, not for now. Kitzer, I don't know if it's even true. Like it seems to be a very bad reason. In other words, it seems, and people would say this, and it's based on like a whole theory that I want to get away from. I'm not going to have time to get into what it is and at length why I don't like it. But I don't like this whole like once upon a time there were prophets, suddenly there isn't, so we're stuck. Well, what kind of nonsense is that? I don't believe that, and I don't know who said that. What I think is that there's something else. What I think is, and this is a Ferish Gemara and Megillah. What's the tzad not to write the Megillah? Al Toisef Al Devorav. Al Lekasafti L'Chashalishim, which is the pusik that the Sedra quotes. Al Lekasafti L'Chashalishim, whatever. I've written you everything. That's the pusik Mishnah is basically saying something like everything you need is written down and use it. And what I would understand here, and going back to our previous discussions of things like this, is that what the Chazal understand here is that there's this limited amount of structures that explain the world, that are needed to understand the world, that are needed to act in the world, that are needed to be a good Jew, to be a good person. There's not an infinite amount of them. We're not still making them. There's no, like the Tarek Mitzvah thing.
We only need one bag.
Right?
Yeah, and then when
exactly.
someone else comes in, everyone's powered now.
But it's true. It seems to be such a waste of time to invent a new one. It's like different set of. Yes. I'm trying to make Chazal into this theory. But of here adding Tanakh, the Rambam has only Chumash, but we're adding the whole Tanakh into this story because we are taking more seriously certain more things.
Like at some point,
not only architects. In other words, if you're not interested in history, as in like one thing after another, we're interested in how to live. Right? We're interested in what the correct way of living is and what the correct way of understanding the world is, right? Now, if the Torah would be missing, right? If it would be missing the story of Purim, right? The Machlokes, really, if you think about it, Machlokes Esther and the Chachomim, or Machlokes later al Tanakh, if Esther is part of the Tanakh, is there anything new in Esther? Right? Someone says, well, what do you mean? We have the story in Beshalach, we have the story in Shmuel, we have the story wherever else, and sorry, Mishnah. We have the whole story. Why do you want something to read on Purim? I've got 3 things to read. What do you want? For the Haftarah, for Mincha, for Shachris, whatever you're looking for Torahs, there's all there. Comes Esther and says, no. Chavadiyik, it says Zikurim B'Sefer. This is all Roshas have trying to say something, right? It's not just a made up thing. Shalishim, Ribiyim, Ribayim. It says something. I'm saying something. I'm adding something to the structure. What exactly it is? Figure it out. You can say Torah Sacham Purim, what exactly it is. But there's something I'm adding. Okay, if you're adding, And in other words, I'm showing you that the original text says that there's 4 of these, right? This kind of thing called Amalek has 4 of them, not 3. If there's 4, or you could say, well, Torah and Mishnah Torah are the same thing, so therefore it's 3, whatever the discussion of there is, then I have to give it to you, right? In other words, if the Torah would be missing something, one of the stories, not only one of the mitzvahs, then we would not have something to learn on Purim, or we would not have what to do about Chanukah. But since Chanukah is nothing new, Chanukah says in the title already.
You're answering up why people do the last year's share. You're answering now.
If you have nothing to do with Chadash, you say last year's share.
They think they're Mechadash a new thing.
Then you shouldn't do last year's share.
I'm saying, but they think, people, it's so true what you're saying, is that people come and say, no, it's a new thread of Jews who are bad to you. Because it's never there. The bad Jews archetype isn't there. So they that's what they're talking about.
If there's then those Yidden, exactly. I see what you're saying. You're saying that since in the whole Torah there's no machlokas between the good Jews and the bad Jews. Of course there is, but let's assume there isn't. And therefore, the only Makar is in history, and that's statement. If you want to read, you have to read it about Shema V'Leich. You find a place in the Torah where it says the story, and that's where it says V'Lo Yosen. It's true, and that's the way of understand. Right? That's guess what I'm trying to say is exactly. And what I'm trying to say is that there's Hilchas history, or there's Hilchas Siper Nisim, and Hilchas Siper Nisim are Mashakus V'Torah Lo Puchas V'Lo Yosen. You can't that now. If there would be a new thing, then we have to write a new shtickle Torah. But since we believe that the Torah is complete, and the Torah is complete is not. I'm very very clear. Not because happens to be we have lost the access code to Shemayim. That's nonsense. We don't. By the way, we do have the access code. We have Chachamim, which are even better. We have better access codes. We're not missing any access to the truth of heaven. That's which is, and people always, the funny people that like to live in this differences, like, right, so Nevuah changed it to Chachma. That's not what it says. It says that Nevuah, which is Recha Kodesh, right, meaning to know the truth, has moved. It used to be Nevi'im that says, now it's Chachamim. Very good, we're not missing anything. Nothing to be sad about. There's no, and actually, I mean, there's Psukim and there's the Shonim, but it doesn't seem, in all the Zimon Chazal, doesn't seem they're sad about there not being Nevuah. Because they don't think they're missing anything. They're not living in the world where they're missing something. They're very happy. Or at least that's what I want to say. And they have access. So, but in any case, for sure, when they say the Tanakh is finished, it's finished because it's complete by its nature, the theory is finished. Why would I add something? Al Toisef Al Tevurav. That's what we're saying. Al Toisef Al Tevurav is not like, don't make things that are not from God. Of course not, right? Don't make things that are from God because God stopped to talk. Why would He stop talking? Al Toisef is literally like Al Toisef. Don't add things because Kalam Toisef Gerei. You just we already have it. And if we don't have it, we'll have to be mefarish it. But that's also part of
Yannick Bagga. You don't like that's what Esav did also.
Yeah,
that's what
it's not also, but they don't see that as adding something. If they would see it as adding something, they would have been honest and added a perek. They really see it as that way. Maybe it needs elucidation. It needs to be mefarish. That's why you need chachamim. Very good. Not saying you don't need chachamim. You can't have only the Torah. You never could do that. You need interpretation. But it's all the structures and all this real chacham, all the Torah that we need are already here. And therefore, there's nothing new. And therefore, when they learn Chanukah, they learn literally. They open the Sefer Torah and they learn Parshas Chanuka Samizbach from Parshas Nasayah. There's actually many more. You could read from Shlomo and you could make it chilik. Is this more like this? Is it more like that? Is there something new? All of these things are good, and that's why I think they don't write history, because history is just like adding more examples for the same thing. It's like some sort of a waste of time. Exactly, that's a great example. It says in my thing. And Chazal say Chom B'Ashani, and you read all the Midrashim and all the Piyutim, just ignore the whole, as if it happened twice. And you're like, oh, the more said, well, since it happened twice, it's more Chama.
Try to work out the days, we try to make it make sense.
And I don't even know if it's literally true that it happened on the same day. Who cares? It's the same concept. So it was Tez B'Av, it was Ayin B'Av, it was in the summer, whatever. But if it was exactly that day, who knows? There's a machlokes, there's a confusion, there's Shalmi, all these things.
More says already the first is a confusing time.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody really knows. But the point is, it's the same thing, and we could read the same book when we do this. We read the Echa, and Echa was not written on Acham Be'ez Shani. Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's the same story happened again. So we're living the same one. Yeah, and they do this for everything. And it's because they don't have a because they have a scientific kind of understanding of what history is. They don't think of history as something happening after another. They think of it as, well, maybe it happens to be like that, but it's more like there's certain, like Lema Atim Legaltim, right? That's one of the only places where the Gemara says the name of what they say. Lema Atim Legaltim Chaloisam, Lema Atim made this, Legaltim like that. As I say, just Shemus Nerdufim, right? History is just a bunch of Shemus Nerdufim, where once it's this guy, once it's that guy, and it's very weird. Like we're all the Darshunim read these Midrashim and say like, well, why is Ma'astim Puras and Galtim Yovan, whatever, why is Choshech, Toiv, what they're saying is these are all the same thing. It's Malchus this, Malchus that, it's just changing names, but they're the same people. They're the same things. And there's a waste of time to learn, to make like a thing out of the contingencies of history. What they want to know is the torah of the story, and they have that. Very good shot. Josephus, in the end of his book, how's it called? Ancient Things of the Jews, whatever is his big history of the Jews, says he thinks he's one of the only two or three people that have been able to accomplish such a great thing. And he says, because by us, by in Judea, we don't respect people that could read Greek and can translate things into other languages and make it perfectly, literally perfect. He says, because we think, and this he says this, and there's a few articles I was reading about this shtickle, but he says because in the end, it's in the last paragraph of the, how's it called? Antiquities of the Jews. Yeah, Kadmonius Ayudim. It says, and he's using Greek terminology here. Says, by us, the only knowledge we value is either understanding the laws or explaining the Kisvei HaKodesh, explaining the Bible. Those are and I say that's called Mikra v'Mishnah, right? Medrash and Halacha. Everything else we think is worthy of slaves, not of free people. Right? Remember the liberal arts. Anything that you need to do, or anything that is done for a purpose, is a job for a slave. Free people are the ones that are contemplating the free things, or the eternal things, or the things that are needed for human to live, that are ends of human life. Right? That's why we have liberal arts worthy of free people. And what he's saying is that according to the tradition of the Jews, you have to know how to live, or to understand the Kisvei HaKodesh, which are explaining the truth. That's worthy of a person, of a man. But like to be able to say the same story 4 times, that's just work. That's what, get a slave, get a machine to do that. Just to translate, and like he says, to translate into Greek. Well, like now you can get a machine to do that. It's not really work worthy of a man to translate things into Greek. To be able to say the same thing in Hebrew, and he's like very proud that he did it. He thinks it's worth do that. Okay, but he says by us we don't respect it. That's what Chacham Yevana says, which is just translation. That's what really the reason the Chacham and like Chacham Yevana and Chazal just means Greek language, right, or Greek literature, which is a way that was spoken about actually in Greece. It doesn't mean Greek philosophy; it means Greek literature. And what they're saying is the content must be the same if it's true, and since they believe the Torah is true, so it must have the true content in it. Now, the work of translating it is just, there's also a problem with getting involved with different nations, and they're in a fight, and they might kill us because of that. There's like a political problem with that. But it's a Shagazri, remember, which for political reasons. But what Joseph is saying is just too much work. Why would anyone waste his time on translating the truth into another language? Like, yeah, maybe if it's needed, but he's basically saying, I'm a slave.
We say it was already written in all the languages.
What?
We just say it was already written in all the languages.
Yeah,
we say it was already written in all the languages.
Yeah, because the content is not written in any language. But all this work of like, let's figure out how to write things properly in Greek and say them again, that's just it's just work. It's not wisdom, it's work. Yeah, I think this is a very good idea of. You could argue this like we did a few weeks ago. Maybe they don't really know everything, and therefore you should do history. But what I want to claim, and specifically about certain details of history in Chanukah, is that they do know it. And what the reason, like when you see them cutting out things and rechanging things and saying them backwards and forwards, this is because they're learning things. Because their way of we have to get to a whole theory of causality in history. But what they think is that, in other words, it's not like the modern people all ask all this wars, and then you tell me stories about menorahs and even without the menorahs, like stories of the Beis Mikdash, whatever. But it's not that they don't know, they don't know all the details, or at some point they knew, right? Then they forgot because it's not important. But it's not like they're just ignoring that. What it is that there's like a halacha. There's a halacha of how to say the story of Chanukah. The halacha is that you say it like it says in Al Nissim, or like it says in the Rambam, or like it says in Megillas Nitziachas, or in other midrashim. The halacha is that you don't say it in the way it says in Sefer Hashmonaim. And one of the halachas is that you don't say the story of the Mesiavdim. That's like a halacha. How do we know it? From the Torah. Because Torah never has such stories. No, it's true. It's a halacha. What do you mean the halacha on history? Yeah, because what happened. We're not interested in just being scribes of, authentically writing down what happened. We're interested in understanding what happened and why it happened, in order so we should be able to live correctly. And we, according to the way we understand, which needs explanation for each detail, but the way we understand, these things are not what really happened, or not what's important. Right? It's extraneous details. It's just long, tedious lists of who was born first, whatever. That's not. I saw a joke. I'm going to finish with that. I was listening to a bunch of people talking about history in Chazal, and some guy said that he doesn't understand why all the professors are so trying to understand why Chazal don't seem to believe in history. I mean, he's been to a lot of history classes in school and they're boring. So, and then he said a nice word. Said he has a proof for this from the Megillah. But it's true, and what I got said it's really like in some metaphysical sense it's boring. But it says in the Megillah, it says that Antiochus couldn't, who's the guy from the Megillah? Achashverosh couldn't sleep. And he's trying to fall asleep, so he's counting sheep. Okay, tell me some history. That history is boring. Okay, that's the story.